The massive crystalline halls of the Galactic Defense Academy stretched out like a glittering maze under 3 artificial suns. Rainbow light danced across the walls and floors, creating patterns that shifted with each passing moment. In the center of this wonder, training grounds buzzed with activity as dozens of different alien species practiced their combat skills. Cadet Lee Hannah walked slowly through the main corridor, her small hands adjusting the silver uniform that felt too smooth against her skin. Back on Earth, everything was rough. Clothes made from tough materials, air that bit at your lungs, ground that fought back with every step. Here, everything felt soft and easy, almost fake. Another Deathworlder. She heard someone whisper behind her. The voice belonged to a tall, blue-skinned creature with 4 arms. Look how tiny she is. Are we sure she belongs here? I heard their planet try to kill them every day. Another voice added. Maybe that is why they sent such a small one. The big ones probably did not survive. Hannah kept walking, her dark eyes moving left and right, taking in every detail. The Academy was home to over 40 different alien races, each one stranger than the last. She watched a group of hulking Draknari cadets practicing nearby. Their skin looked like metal armor, thick and gray, covering bodies that stood 7 feet tall. When they hit the training dummies, the sound echoed to the hall like thunder. In another area, ghostly white beings called Lumfi were doing something that looked like dancing. But as Hannah watched more closely, she realized they were moving through solid walls, their bodies becoming see-through whenever they touched something solid. One of them noticed her staring and waved a translucent hand before disappearing completely through a thick metal door. Near the weapons area, insect-like creatures with 4 arms each were spinning energy staffs so fast they looked like glowing wheels. Their movements were sharp and precise, like deadly machines. Everything they did looked perfect and calculated. And then there were the humans. Just Hannah, one small girl from a planet that most of the galaxy considered too dangerous to visit. Earth, she had heard one instructor say during her arrival interview, is what we call a death world. Your species survived conditions that would kill most others within hours. The instructor had looked at her with something like wonder and fear mixed together. We are curious to see what that survival has taught you. At the instructor station, Velcris clicked his sharp mandibles together as he read through his data pad. The mantis-like Thrixon had taught combat training for over 60 standard years. His compound eyes could track 12 different moving targets at once, and his reflexes were faster than most species could even see. He had trained warriors from every corner of the galaxy, but this was his first human student. Remarkable, he muttered to himself, reading Hannah's file again. The first human to qualify for advanced combat training. Physical scores are average. Speed ratings are normal. Strength levels are below standard for most cadets. He paused, his head tilting in confusion. So, why do I feel worried about having her in my class? The file mentioned Earth's classification level, Deathworld Class 12. Only 17 planets in the known galaxy rated that high on the danger scale. Most of them had no intelligent life, because nothing could survive long enough to evolve. Earth was different. Earth had produced a species that not only survived but thrived in conditions that would destroy civilizations. Perhaps, Velcris thought, surviving a death world teaches lessons that cannot be measured by our standard tests. Hannah finally found her assigned quarters on level 15. The room was small but clean, with a bed, desk, and storage unit. Everything was made from the same smooth, white material that seemed to be everywhere in the academy. She set down her single bag, everything she owned fit inside, and looked out the window. Below, she could see the academy's main training ground. Hundreds of cadets were practicing, their alien forms moving in ways that defied what she thought was possible. Some flew without wings. Others seemed to bend light around themselves. A few appeared to be lifting massive weights with their minds alone. She touched the window, and for a moment, she felt homesick. On Earth, training meant running from things that wanted to eat you. It meant learning to fight with whatever you could find. It meant understanding that every day was a test, and failing meant you did not get to try again tomorrow. Here, training looked like a game. Clean uniforms, safety equipment. instructors who stopped fights before anyone got hurt. It all seemed so gentle. But Hannah had not come here to judge their methods. She had come to learn and to represent her species. The Galactic Council had finally agreed to let humans join the Academy after centuries of debate. She was the first, but hopefully not the last. Tomorrow, she would begin her classes. Tomorrow, she would start proving that humans belonged among the stars, despite coming from a world that tried to kill them every day. Tomorrow, everything would change. She unpacked her few belongings and prepared for sleep, unaware that across the academy, other cadets were already making plans to test a small human girl who had somehow earned a place among the galaxy's future warriors. 3 weeks had passed since Hannah first walked through the academy's glittering halls. In that time, she had become known as the Quiet One. While other cadets spent their free time bragging about their natural abilities, Hannah sat in corners and watched everything with careful eyes. She learned quickly that each species had their own special gifts. The massive Gorthak cadets were built like walking tanks. Their thick, rocky skin could stop energy blasts, and their huge fists could punch through metal walls. During combat practice, they would charge forward like angry bulls, trusting their natural armor to protect them while they crushed anything in their path. The insect-like Krixvel were completely different. They moved like deadly dancers, their 4 arms spinning weapons in patterns too fast for most eyes to follow. Hannah watched them during sword training and realized they could attack from angles that 2-armed species could never manage. One could block with 2 arms while the other 2 struck from opposite sides at the same time. The ghostly Lumphi preferred to avoid fights altogether. When threatened, they would simply phase through their attackers, becoming untouchable. Hannah had seen one cadet walk through an entire obstacle course without touching a single barrier, just flowing like smoke through every wall and trap. Then there were species like the Veltari, with their natural telepathy. They could read their opponent's moves before they happened, making them almost impossible to surprise. And the crystal-skinned HFY could absorb energy attacks and throw them back twice as strong. Every species had something that made them special in combat. Every species except humans. Hannah did not let this bother her. She had survived 18 years on Earth by being patient and watching for opportunities. She would do the same here. But not everyone was content to leave her alone. "Hey, Deathworlder." The voice boomed across the cafeteria like a thunderclap. Hannah looked up from her meal to see Cadet Vordan walking toward her table. The Draknari stood 7 feet tall, his skin looking like polished metal armor. When he moved, she could hear the soft scraping sound his natural plates made against each other. Vordan had been at the academy for 2 years. Everyone knew his story. His species came from a world of constant warfare, where only the strongest survived adulthood. His natural armor could stop most energy weapons, and his strength was enough to bend steel bars with his bare hands. He was also known for being a bully. "I have been wondering about something," Vordan said, beginning to circle her table like a hungry predator. "What makes you so special? I mean, look at you." Other cadets started gathering around, sensing that something interesting was about to happen. The cafeteria grew quiet as conversation stopped and heads turned to watch. Hannah set down her fork and looked up at the towering alien. "I am not sure what you mean," she said in her calm, quiet voice. Vordan gestured at himself with one massive hand. "I have armor that can stop plasma bolts. Korek over there can breathe fire. Telvin can read minds. But you," he laughed, the sound like rocks grinding together, "you're just small and soft. So what is your special power? What makes humans worth a place at this academy?" "I am here to learn, just like everyone else," Hannah replied politely. She kept her voice steady, and her hands relaxed on the table. The crowd of watching cadets grew larger. Some of them were smiling, excited to see the quiet human girl finally get challenged. Others looked uncomfortable, but did nothing to help. Vordan's laugh got louder. "Modest. I like that in prey animals." His yellow eyes gleamed with something ugly as he moved closer. "Maybe you could teach me about human flexibility. I hear your species is good at bending." His large, armored hand reached out toward her shoulder. The gesture looked casual, but Hannah could see the threat behind it. On his homeworld, Touching someone without permission was how dominance fights began. She moved smoothly backward, sliding her chair away from the table just enough to avoid his reach. Her expression never changed. "I would rather not," she said simply. Vordan's smile grew wider, showing teeth like metal spikes. "I was not asking, little Deathworlder." The cafeteria was completely silent now. Even the server machines had stopped their quiet humming. Every eye was focused on the small human girl and the massive armored alien looming over her. Hannah could feel her heart beating faster, but she kept her breathing steady. This moment had been coming since her first day. She had seen the looks, heard the whispers. Many of the other cadets saw humans as weak curiosities, something to be tested and pushed around. She thought about Earth, about the lessons learned in forests where every shadow might hide death, about cities where showing weakness meant becoming a victim, about a world that had taught her species one simple truth. When someone decides to hurt you, talking will not save you. Vordan reached for her again, his movements slow and confident. He expected her to freeze, to submit, to prove that humans were as weak as they looked. He was about to learn why Earth was classified as a death world, and why its children had learned to be very, very dangerous when threatened. The next morning arrived with the soft chime of the Academy's artificial dawn. Hannah had slept poorly, her dreams filled with memories of Earth's dangers and the promise of confrontation that hung in the air like smoke. She dressed quickly in her training uniform and made her way to the main arena. The combat training hall was massive, with high ceilings that disappeared into shadow and walls lined with protective barriers. Energy shields hummed softly around the training mats, designed to contain any accidents that might happen during practice. The floor was made of a special material that could absorb impacts and prevent serious injuries. Dozens of cadets filed in, their various forms creating a strange parade of colors, shapes, and sizes. The air buzzed with nervous energy as everyone took their positions around the central training area. Instructor Velcris stood at the center of it all, his mantis-like form perfectly still as his compound eyes tracked every movement in the room. The Thrixan had taught combat for decades, and his enhanced senses could process information faster than most species could even think. He could see the tension between certain cadets, smell the fear and excitement that filled the air. "Today," his translated voice echoed through the chamber with mechanical precision, "we will practice defensive responses to unwanted physical contact." He paused, letting his eyes sweep across the assembled students. "This is not about attacking. This is about protecting yourself when someone tries to harm you." Several hands went up around the room. Cadets volunteered to demonstrate techniques, eager to show off their natural abilities or newly learned skills. But one voice cut through all the others. "I volunteer to demonstrate." Vordan called out loudly, his metallic voice carrying across the arena, his predatory gaze fixed on Hannah, like a hunter spotting wounded prey. With the human, a wave of whispers ran through the assembled cadets. Some leaned forward with excitement, sensing drama. Others looked uncomfortable, remembering the tension from yesterday's cafeteria incident. A few of the more experienced students exchanged worried glances. Instructor Velcris felt his mandibles click together involuntarily. His enhanced senses picked up the subtle changes in the room's atmosphere. Heart rates increasing, breathing patterns shifting, the sharp scent of adrenaline beginning to fill the air. Something about the human's complete stillness made him uneasy. While other cadets showed obvious signs of nervousness when facing combat practice, Hannah sat perfectly calm, her dark eyes focused but relaxed. It was the kind of stillness he had only seen in apex predators waiting for the right moment to strike. "Very well," he said after a long pause. "Cadet Lee, are you prepared?" Hannah rose from her position on the bench and walked toward the center mat. Her movements were smooth and unhurried, like someone taking a casual walk rather than approaching a potentially dangerous situation. She nodded once to the instructor. "I am ready." The training mat felt soft under her feet, nothing like the unforgiving ground of Earth where a single misstep could mean death. She moved to the center of the designated area and turned to face Vordan, who was approaching with the confident swagger of someone who had never lost a fight. Her breathing remained perfectly steady. Her posture stayed relaxed. Years of surviving on Earth had taught her many lessons, but one of the most important was this: Tension was the enemy of speed. When something wanted to kill you, you had to be faster than thought, quicker than fear. The arena fell silent except for the quiet hum of energy barriers and life support systems. Even the most talkative cadets stopped their conversations to watch. Vordan stepped onto the mat with sound like metal boots on stone. At 7 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating, he looked like a walking tank next to Hannah's small frame. He cracked his knuckles, the sound echoing through the chamber. "This should be educational," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "For both of us." Instructor Velchris raised one clawed hand. His compound eyes focused on both combatants, his enhanced perception ready to catch every detail of what was about to happen. "Remember, this is a defensive exercise. The goal is to neutralize unwanted contact, not to cause permanent harm." Both cadets nodded their understanding. "Begin on my count," Velchris announced. 3, 2, 1, begin." The word was barely out of his mouth when Vordan lunged forward with all the confidence of a predator that had never met anything capable of fighting back. His armored hand reached straight for Hannah's throat, intending to grab her and demonstrate the vast difference in their strength. What happened next occurred so quickly that even Instructor Velchris, with his superhuman processing speed, could only catch fragments of the movement. Hannah's left hand came up in a smooth arc, deflecting Vordan's incoming arm just enough to redirect his momentum. At the same moment, her right hand darted forward like a striking snake, finding the small gap between armor plates at his elbow joint. Her body pivoted with fluid precision, using his own forward motion against him. The 7-foot Draknari warrior hit the training mat with sound like a building collapsing. He was unconscious before his armored back touched the ground, completely unaware of what had just happened to him. The chronometer on the wall read exactly 0.8 seconds from start to finish. The training arena became as quiet as empty space. The only sounds were the soft hum of life support systems and the barely audible breathing of dozens of cadets who had just witnessed something impossible. On the mat, Vordan lay perfectly still, his massive armor form looking like a fallen statue. Instructor Velchris stood frozen in place, his compound eyes wide with shock. In all his 8 decades of teaching combat at the academy, he had never seen anything like what had just happened. His enhanced senses had been focused, ready to catch every detail of the demonstration. But the human's movement had been so fast, so precise, that even his superhuman perception had only caught pieces of it. Not just fast. That was the thing that made his mandibles click nervously. He had seen fast before. The Krixvel could move their 4 arms in blurs of motion. The Zephi could strike like lightning when they channeled energy through their crystal bodies. But this had been different. This had been efficient in a way that spoke of something darker than training. "Medical team to Arena 7, he called out, his voice carefully controlled despite the confusion racing through his mind. Non-emergency, but immediate assistance required. The medical team arrived within moments, their anti-gravity stretcher floating silently behind them. They moved quickly to examine Vordan, their instruments beeping and humming as they scanned his unconscious form. 3 dislocated joints, reported the lead medic, a tall blue-skinned Veltari whose telepathic abilities helped him assess patient conditions. Mild concussion, some bruising, but no permanent damage. He will recover fully within a few days. Word began to spread to the Academy's communication networks faster than light could travel. Students whispered into their personal communicators. Instructors sent urgent messages to their superiors. Within minutes, the story was racing through every level of the massive structure. The small human girl had dropped the Draknari warrior in less than 1 second. Other instructors began arriving at the arena, drawn by curiosity and concern. They stood at the edges of the training mat, looking back and forth between the unconscious Vordan and a small human girl who had somehow done this to him. Hannah knelt beside the stretcher as the medics prepared to move Vordan. Her movements were gentle and careful as she helped him position his heavy form. There was no pride in her expression, no satisfaction at having won. She looked more concerned than anything else. "Cadet Lee," said Instructor Quintel, approaching with slow, measured steps. The crystalline being species were known throughout the galaxy for their strategic thinking and careful analysis. "Can you explain what just happened here?" Hannah looked up from where she was checking to make sure Vordan's arm was properly supported on the stretcher. Her dark eyes held no anger, no excitement from the fight. She just looked tired. On Earth, everything is trying to kill you, she said simply, her voice quiet but clear enough for everyone to hear. The weather can freeze you or burn you or drown you without warning. The animals see you as food. Some of the plants are poisonous just a touch. And sometimes, even other humans become dangerous. She stood up and brushed dust off her training uniform. You learn to end threats quickly, or you don't survive long enough to learn anything else. The instructors exchanged glances. They had all read Earth's classification files when the first human student was accepted to the academy. But reading words on a data pad was different from seeing the results in person. Later that evening, after the arena had been cleared and Vordan had been taken to Medical Bay, the senior instructors gathered in Conference Room Alpha. The walls were covered with holographic displays showing Earth's classification data, environmental reports, and biological analysis of human physiology. What they had previously dismissed as bureaucratic exaggeration now read like a survival horror story. "Listen to this," said Instructor Mektar, reading from an official Galactic Council report. "Earth experiences regular natural disasters that would destroy most civilizations. Earthquakes that can level cities. Storms that carry winds over 200 kilometers per hour. Temperature ranges from -40 to +50 degrees in some regions. The biological diversity is equally extreme," added Quintel, highlighting another section. "Over 8 million known species, many of them predators. Venomous insects, disease-carrying parasites, large carnivores that actively hunt the dominant species." Velcris clicked his mandibles as he read through the psychological profiles. And yet, humans not only survived in this environment, they thrived. They became the dominant species on their planet through adaptation, intelligence, and... He paused, looking for the right words. "Combat efficiency," finished Instructor Yelvan, a peaceful Lumphi who rarely spoke in meetings. They evolved not just to survive, but to eliminate threats with minimum effort and maximum effectiveness. The room fell silent as the implication sank in. They had accepted a human student thinking she would be an interesting curiosity, perhaps offering new perspectives on survival techniques. What they had not realized was that they had accepted a member of a species that had been forged into living weapons by their own hostile world. "They are not just survivors," Velcris said quietly, his compound eyes reflecting the data displays around the room. "They are weapons that learn to think." The other instructors nodded slowly, finally understanding what it meant to come from a Deathworld. And tomorrow, they would have to figure out how to teach someone who had already learned the most important lesson in the universe: how to stay alive. The morning light filtered through the medical bay's large windows as Hannah made her way down the sterile white corridors. She had spent most of the night thinking about what had happened in the training arena, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. Violence was supposed to be a last resort, something you used only when all other options were gone. But Vordan had not given her any other choice. She found him in bed 7, his massive form looking strange and vulnerable under the clean white sheets. A regeneration sleeve covered his right arm, the advanced medical device working to repair the damage she had caused. His yellow eyes tracked her movement as she entered, but there was something different in his gaze now. The predatory arrogance was gone, replaced by something she had not expected to see: respect. "I underestimated you," he said quietly as she approached his bed. His voice had lost its mocking edge, sounding more thoughtful than she had ever heard it. "My species values strength above all else. Physical power, natural armor, the ability to crush your enemies with brute force." He flexed his uninjured hand, watching the metal-like skin catch the light. "I thought because you were small and soft, you were weak." Hannah pulled up a chair and sat beside his bed, her movements careful and non-threatening. "Size is not everything," she replied, her voice gentle. "On my world, the deadliest creatures are often the smallest ones. A tiny spider can kill a human with one bite. A small snake can drop a large animal in minutes. We learned very early not to judge threats by how big they look." Vordan nodded slowly, his reptilian features showing something like understanding. "On my home world, the biggest warriors rule. If you can break your enemies with your hands, you are respected. If you are small, you serve the strong. He looked at his injured arm. I never considered that there might be other kinds of strength. Over the next few days, word of the incident spread throughout the academy, but not in the way Hannah had feared. She had expected fear, whispered conversations, and careful avoidance from the other cadets. Instead, she found herself facing something completely different: curiosity. Students began approaching her in the corridors, in the cafeteria, during break times between classes. They came respectfully, with genuine questions rather than challenges. "Is it true that your planet has animals that hunt humans?" asked a young Cricksville cadet, her forearms gesturing excitedly as she spoke. "What kind of training did you do on Earth?" wondered a crystalline Zephi student. "Our combat forms are based on energy manipulation. How do you fight without natural weapons? Can you really read when someone is about to attack just by watching their body?" This from a telepathic Veltari who was used to reading minds rather than physical signals. Hannah answered their questions honestly, describing Earth's harsh environments, the constant need to stay alert, and the survival techniques that every human child learned before they could even read properly. She talked about reading body language, about using an attacker's own strength and momentum against them, about staying calm when everything around you wanted to cause harm. To her surprise, the other cadets were fascinated rather than frightened. Within a month, something remarkable began to happen. Instructor started asking Hannah to assist with certain training sessions. At first, she was nervous about teaching alien students who possessed natural abilities she could never match. But she quickly discovered that her knowledge filled gaps in their education that no one had even realized existed. The massive Gorthak cadets were incredibly strong, but relied too heavily on brute force. Hannah taught them about leverage, showing how a smaller opponent could use physics and positioning to overcome raw power. She demonstrated how to read an enemy's stance, how to predict where they would move next, how to turn her own strength into a weakness. The lightning-fast Cricksville were deadly with weapons, but struggled when disarmed. Hannah worked with them on empty-hand combat, teaching them how humans had learned to fight with nothing but their bodies and minds. Even the ghostly Lumphi, who could phase through attacks, discovered value in her lessons about psychological warfare and staying calm under pressure. In return, the alien cadets shared their own knowledge freely. The Lumphi taught her meditation techniques that could slow her heart rate and help her think clearly even in the most stressful situations. The Cricksville showed her coordination exercises that improved her ability to track multiple opponents at once. The Draknari, including Vordan once he recovered, demonstrated endurance training methods that pushed the body beyond its normal limits. The Academy's cultural exchange program, which had been a small experimental project, expanded rapidly. Other species began to understand that humanity's value was not in possessing any single overwhelming advantage. Instead, it lay in their adaptability, their refusal to give up no matter how bad things got, and their hard-won wisdom about survival in a hostile universe. Instructor Velcris often found himself watching these mixed-species training sessions from his office window. Today, he observed Hannah sparring with a young Gorthak cadet who outweighed her by 300 pounds. She moved with the same calm efficiency as always, but now her alien classmate understood what he was seeing. The Gorthak was learning not just to rely on his natural strength, but to think strategically, to read his opponent, to survive by being smarter rather than just stronger. Remarkable, Velcris clicked to himself, his mandibles moving in what might have been a smile. The Deathworlders do not just survive. They teach others how to survive too. Outside the Academy's great windows, the stars continued their eternal dance through the cosmos. And somewhere among those distant lights, humanity was taking its first steps toward becoming not just another member of the galactic community, but perhaps its most valuable teachers, because they had learned the most important lesson in the universe: how to turn a world that wanted to kill you into a home worth fighting for.